Following some new developments out of Indiana, the Delphi murder case, an Indiana judge, Judge Gull, has ruled that Richard Allen cannot use a third-party culprit defense strategy at his upcoming trial. This was under contention. Defense wanted to bring in these other theories.
Yeah, Odinism being one of them. Allen is charged with 2 counts of murder for the deaths of Libby and Abigail Williams. Their bodies were found on February 14th of 2017. And we have someone here who can discuss that a lot more.
Yes, our senior producer, Barbara McDonald, she knows this case quite well and has known it from the beginning. Let's start with this latest ruling from Judge Gull, which seems to sort of fall in place with other rulings she has made. Defense pretty much striking out across the board when it comes to Judge Gull.
That's right, and basically there was a 3-day hearing in July and the first part of August that went over this and gave the defense an opportunity to come to court and provide evidence that there was actually admissible evidence related to these third-party culprits that they wanted to point at. And the judge said after that hearing that she was not satisfied that they had done that they had not presented anything that was admissible in court, showing that these people were at the scene or were not where they were supposed to be at the time. And so the judge is saying, no, you're not going to be able to bring any of this in. But the state's motion in limine was asking for a whole lot more than just limiting this third-party defense. And so some of the other things that the judge has said is not going to be allowed is any reference to even the investigator who looked into the Odinism theory. You know, that was a route that investigators had followed in the early days of the investigation. They said they didn't find anything that led them to believe that that was actually what was involved here, and so they stopped pursuing it. But those materials are what the defense has seized on, and they're not even allowed to mention the detective who looked into this and wrote that initial report about Odinism. His name is Todd Click. He is now retired, and his name isn't going to come in either. There's also not going to be any reference to the geofencing data, which the defense has indicated in filings, shows that there were other phones walking around the crime scene during the time that the girls were missing and their bodies hadn't yet been discovered. And so the judge is saying that also is not going to come into this trial. The other thing that I think is rather interesting is the state asked to prohibit any reference, and this is a quote from his filing, from Nick McLeland's filing, any reference to any prior bad acts or acts of any witnesses that plan to testify. And so it's going to be really interesting. There are obviously a lot of people who follow this case who think that this judge is biased against the defense and the defendant, Richard Allen, who you see there on your screen. He has been subjected to some very harsh treatment during his incarceration after his arrest. He is now out of the maximum security prison system and is in a county jail awaiting trial, which is supposed to happen next month. But Julia, I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, that these motions and these early decisions set everything up for the tone of the trial, and that's what's happening here. The judge in one motion is saying a lot of this stuff is not going to come in.
It certainly changes the landscape of what we are going to see at the trial. My question is, I know you've been watching all of these motions and pouring through them as they've come in. We've watched this case shift and change, but what's left? If the geofencing is out, if the third-party culprit defense is out for these defense attorneys, what do you think is going to be their angle at trial?
It's going to be tough. You know, there are a lot of attorneys discussing this case on social media who are commenting that this definitely sets this case up for an appeal. One even worded it that this ruling basically makes this first trial a practice run, which I know nobody involved in this case wants to see happen. The families of these poor girls, they've been waiting 7 years for justice. The arrest of Richard Allen came almost 5 years into this investigation. They are ready to move on to the next chapter of their grieving in all of this. So it's going to be really interesting. But, you know, Richard Allen's own words place him at the trails the day the girls went missing, around the time that they were missing. We don't know if there's any phone data, since it was 5 years later that he was arrested, that might show where exactly he was during those times. But right now it sounds like it's going to be his word against what the state has to offer.
And there's no Ron Logan, no Anthony Schatz,
No Ron Logan, no Anthony Schatz. Anthony Schatz was somebody that law enforcement asked people to help them with information on. He was catfishing girls in Indiana, asking for nude images. He has since been charged and sentenced to 43 years, unrelated to anything having to do with Abby and Libby.
in communication with the girls, right?
He definitely was in communication with at least Libby. And then Ron Logan was the man who owned the property where the girls were found, and he lied about where he was at the time they went missing. He was charged with probation violations. He spent a year behind bars and a year on house arrest. But, you know, these are people that law enforcement has never come out and said for sure that they are cleared. With Ron Logan, with Kegan Kline, they did say they could never place him in Delphi, but Ron Logan lied about where he was, and we still don't know exactly where he was at the time the girls were being killed, and that's another issue for the trial. Law enforcement has been unable to come up with a time of death, so it leaves a lot of questions about exactly who was where, when, and when that crucial time period actually was.
And before I let you go, remind us the trial date is
October 14th through November 15th. It'll start with jury selection in Allen County, which is Fort Wayne, Indiana, and then the rest of it will be in Carroll County, where the crime happened.
All right, Barbara will be there covering for us, Court TV.
Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara McDonald. Let's bring back in Tad Thomas. Tad, your thoughts on this case and specifically this latest setback for the defense. Now, we should remind people that the defendant, Richard Allen, reportedly confessed multiple times to multiple people. There is some there for the state's case.
You know, yeah, that's right. But this is a devastating blow, really, for the defense, isn't it? And what people need to know is that the judges have discretion to keep out irrelevant evidence. It's not that the defense just gets to come in and throw anything they want at the wall. The judge has the right to narrow the proof to something that is a legitimate defense. Now, I agree wholeheartedly that, hey, you know, this case is going up on appeal. This type of a major ruling is certainly something that's going to go up if there's a conviction, whether there's confessions or not. But, you know, the judge has a right to narrow the evidence that's coming in, and the prosecution shouldn't have to, you know, fight ghosts and prove or try to disprove something that, you know, has no basis in fact. So it's a really interesting ruling by the judge, definitely going up on appeal. But, you know, judges, they really try to walk the line and allow the defense to have some leeway so that these convictions actually will be upheld.
Yeah, so she's keeping out the references to this cult, alleged cult, Odinism, that's been coming up in some of these motions by the defense. But the geofencing, you know, we've seen lots of cases where the defense is able to show, hey, there were other people there, other people had access. That doesn't seem like it would be, according to this motion, something that would confuse the jury or mislead them on the facts. What's your thought on that versus some of the other things that the defense wanted to go after?
Right. You know, on the other potential defendants, potential murderers, where there's evidence that they weren't there and there's just nothing that connects them to the scene. You know, I understand the court keeping that out, but you're exactly right. You know, having the geo-tracking data and not having other answers for that, you know, maybe the prosecution's already looked at that and the investigators have looked at what other phones are there, and they've tracked all of those people down and, you know, come up with some reason why those individuals should be excluded. I'd like to know more about that. But, you know, you're exactly right. You know, that's objective data. It's not like it's opinion.